بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد إخوة الإسلام عباد الله. I'd like to welcome the brothers and sisters to another episode of Heavyweight Dialogue, and I am your host Najeeb Al Anjelesi, and of course I have my guest participants or regular participants, our brother Abu Abdullah Ismail and our brother Abu Abdus Salam Siddiq Al Juyani. And as advertised, this particular episode will be dealing with racism and similar traits of Al-Jahiliyyah, similar traits of Al-Jahiliyyah. So with that said, because without a doubt, this is a topic that definitely needs to be touched on in an in-depth manner. And of course, as usual, we have these discussions not to bring up and mention problems, but to highlight them in order for the Muslims to effectively deal with them. As racism is a munkar, it's an evil. It's an evil that, if found within the ranks of the Muslims, has to be addressed and or dealt with. So when looking at this particular subject matter, and I want to begin with the statement of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala when He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ or لِلْعَالِمِينَ. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He states, and from His signs is the creation of the heavens and the night, and the differences in tongues and colors, or in languages and or complexions. Indeed, and that is a sign for those who have been given knowledge. Indeed, this is a sign for those who have been given knowledge. Shaykh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'adi, he says, concerning a portion of the verse, the differences of tongues and colors or languages and complexions, he states, yani, as it relates to the abundance of them, right? Along with their foundation being one. And the language, makharij al-huruf wahida, yani, basically the language or the tongue being one. And with that, you don't find two sounds that are in agreement, meaning the voice of an individual differs from the voice of another individual. You don't find two different people's voices being identical. And as from any perspective, likewise, you don't find the outward appearance and or complexion of individuals being alike. Except that you find a difference between it, that which yani brings about a distinguishment between this person and another person. So, and before I continue, because when you go to some of the other tafsirs of this particular verse, the ulama even break it down like, look, you can have within a particular ethnicity or people them being different in their complexions, even though their complexion is very, very, very similar. If we look at Black Americans or Black people in general, we are just different variations of brown. In reality, we are different variations of brown, but you know, brown all throughout the different variations of brown throughout the color spectrum, for lack of better expressions, or scopes. Some being dark chocolate type brown, others being a caramel type brown, and thus forth and so on. These differences Allah Ta'ala has made within people. And by way of this is one of the ways one person is distinguished from another. My looks and complexion distinguishes me from our brother Siddiq, and his complexion and features distinguish him from myself and from our brother Ismail, and thus forth and so on. This is what the Sheikh is alluding to. And so he continues, and that's as it relates to people of the same ethnicity. Now you have different ethnicities with different shades and different colors, and thus forth and so on. So the Sheikh, that particular point is real important to emphasize when looking at what the Sheikh states thereafter. He states, وَهَذَا دَالٌ عَلَى كَمَالِ قُدْرَتِهِ. The way that Allah makes us different in this regard, that this indicates or points to the perfection of Allah Ta'ala's ability, his ability in creating and shaping and forming, and thus forth and so on. This is what these things point to. The differences in the languages. All of this points to the perfection of the Creator and his ability to be able to distinguish however billion people that are walking the face, because there are billions of people walking the face of the earth, and every single last one of them is distinguished by way of feature, complexion, and thus forth and so on. And this is why the beginning of the verse starts off, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and from his signs. And the verse ends, ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. It ends with, and indeed that is a sign for those that have knowledge, that contemplate over Allah Ta'ala signs al-kawniyya wa shar'iyya. Right? So this is a benefit, a tremendous benefit that we as human beings have to consider. And so when going into this particular discussion, then the discussion itself is not as it relates to the hukum in al-Islam concerning racism, because we know there is no racism in Islam. In fact, I think that is well known amongst not just Muslims, but non-Muslims. When we say there's no racism in Islam, meaning Islam does not promote racism. The religion of al-Islam, that which was revealed from above the seven heavens, it does not promote or condone racism. But that's not the point of discussion, because verses like this, verses like the one I was quoted and others similar to this verse clearly indicate that the varying races, ethnicities, on down to the very features of the individual's face, his shape, and thus forth and so on. These things are signs for the magnificent, of the signs as it relates to the magnificence of the Lord of all that exists. Right? So the discussion is not on that, because a lot of times when we hear racism, especially from a lot of Muslim du'at, they always pivot into that particular subject of there is no racism in Islam. Well, this is something that's well known. Islam doesn't promote that. This is something that's well known. The point and purpose of the discussion tonight is as it pertains to Muslims who are not following the legislation of Islam 100%, and have with them racism or types of racism. And this is a reality for anybody who Allah has given a heart in which they are able to, in which they're in a sound intellect, or eyes by which they see, or ears by which they hear, can clearly see. And the Prophet ﷺ, he also mentioned similar to this effect that this would be with some of the Muslims. We have an authentic narration that's collected by Imam Muslim in his Sahih from the narration of Abu Malik al-Ash'ari, where the Prophet ﷺ stated, "Arba'un min amr al-jahiliyyah, or arba'un min ummati min amr al-jahiliyyah, la yatrukunahun." He stated that there are 4 from my ummah that are from the affairs of ignorance, that they will not leave off. The first 2 things he mentions, al-fakhr fil ahsab wa ta' fil ansab. Al-fakhr fil ahsab, boasting about his or her, the boasting concerning one's ancestry, and defamation of one's lineage or lineage. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, in his book Al-Qawl al-Mufid ala Kitab al-Tawheed, he states, Al-Ansab is the jam to nasab, which we normally translate as lineage. He states, وَهُوَ أَصْلُ الْإِنسَانِ وَقَرَابَتُهُ, that it is the foundation of an individual and his kinship, for lack of better translations. Sheikh Fawzan, in his book I'anatul Mustafid bi Sharh Kitab al-Tawheed, he states the translated meaning concerning the statement at-ta' fil ansab. He states it is to cause a diminishing, it is to diminish the lineage of a person. And that is on account of the one who diminishes the lineage of another person. It's on account of him exalting himself or magnifying himself. Or he diminishes others. He diminishes other groups or sets of people, and both are considered to be blameworthy. Both are considered to be blameworthy. So when looking at this particular reality, that which the Prophet ﷺ stated, that these are 2 affairs from amongst Jahiliyyah that would not be left off by some of this ummah. And that brings us into the discussion, because these forms of Jahiliyyah we see occurring. So with that being said, the question, I guess, when it comes to racism, what is racism? And again, we want to deal with this because this is a munkar, and it's upon the Muslims to forbid the evil wherever we see it, to purge it from our ranks wherever we see it. And so the question would be, what is racism? And is racism a form of hizbiyah? Is racism a form of hizbiyah? So I'm gonna leave that to, I'm gonna drop that question right there, and I'll allow the brothers to take that. It looks like it's Ismail, you're ready to deal with that question, huh?
Inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. طيب. Everything okay? It sound like I heard a glitch or something. We good, Sadiq? You can hear me, right? Okay, طيب.
Sadiq, he muted himself, so.
Oh, okay, طيب, inshallah, خير, inshallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا تعالى وصلوات الله وسلامه على خاتم الأنبياء محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So firstly, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for another opportunity to have another tremendous discussion with our brothers and our listening audience, brothers and sisters, our co-panelists, and all those who participate. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. We appreciate the participation. and or support. To respond to the posted question by our brother, Najeeb Al Anjelesi, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, regarding what is racism. Racism, I mean, and there's a lot of different ways I'm sure we can describe it, but for the most part, it entails one group of individuals or one person seeing themselves to be seeing themselves to be superior to another group of people or another person. Okay, and of course this is broad. You have some from the lexicographers who mentioned that racism, a person can't truly be racist unless he or she has previously conquered or been in a position of either political status or something of that nature superior to the people that they're prejudiced against. There are some people from the ulama of the English language that say in order for someone to be truly a racist, he or she would have had to, in some shape, form, or fashion, dominate the people who they are prejudiced towards. All right, but of course, we know language a lot of times evolves, and in a lot of cases, if not all cases, the siyaq, the context, okay, it may wind up being given precedence or given preference, right? It has status, or it takes precedence. That's the word. It takes precedence over what may be the historical utilization of that word. So nowadays, racism is typically used just to show, forms of discrimination or one group of people being mistreated, all right, or treated like they're inferior, not given the same luxuries or justices that another group of people may have been given, and so on and so forth. But I think that what we have as Muslims, one of our biggest problems that we all suffer from, or we all have to deal with, or not suffer from, but we all have to deal with on one level or another, especially Black Muslims. Okay, we're not nationalistic or anything like that, but that's not going to prevent us from talking the reality. Okay, in a lot of cases, in most cases, people of darker skin deal with racism more than anybody else. Now I know everybody, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, and I know that there are a lot of people who probably feel like they've been discriminated against. You have people, Muslims during 9/11, for example. A lot of Muslims were being discriminated against because of their names or because of their national origin or because of their accent or so on and so forth, or the way that they made just some of their physical features. Okay, some of the people resembled in their physical features because they came from the same geographical location as some of the people who were posted on the news who are, alleged to have been involved in those crimes. And anybody who looked like them or had a similar name to them often had to deal with discrimination and prejudice and so on and so forth. Women have been discriminated against historically. We see on the onset of COVID-19, many Asian people were discriminated against, and they were considered people who were victims of racism and so on and so forth. But I say this very confidently and very comfortably without trying to be insensitive to anybody else's racial challenges. Nobody deals with the racism like Black people. And if anybody does, they're either one or two things. They're either stuck in a bubble or they're lying to themselves. There's nobody in modern history. I don't know too much about ancient history, but in modern history and recent history, nobody had to deal with the kind of racism that Black Americans had to deal with. Because regardless of what people want to come up with, the Holocaust or any other, acts of terror that were committed against humanity, I can bring a story, I can bring an account, I can bring a generational situation that will match that, if not make it worse. So in a nutshell, Muslims, we have nationalism within us. It starts out with tribalism. And I challenge anybody to prove me wrong, any of our listeners. A lot of times it starts out with tribalism. It starts out with nationalism and tribalism. Okay, we see with the Arabs, we see with Africans, we see with the Pakistanis, and people from Afghanistan and different places in the South Indian continent, so on and so forth. A lot of those people, they'll have tribalism, tribal pride. My tribe, I want my tribe to marry within my tribe, and I consider my tribe to be special and superior, and so on and so forth. So a lot of times people want to marry outside of their tribe. Then we'll find that those people, sometimes people step outside of the tribe, and it's like, okay, well, some people may be a little lackadaisical when it comes to stepping outside of that tribe. And then once they get into that the first level of acceptance is to do that, to accept someone outside of your tribe. Then it's like, okay, now they go to another country. They may be similar, but it's not the same thing. Like, for example, somebody from Pakistan, somebody from Afghanistan, somebody from Yemen marrying somebody from Saudi Arabia, an Egyptian marrying a Palestinian, so on and so forth, a African from Gambia, or who's maybe from a Soninke African marrying a Wolof or something that's not normal. Right, it gets a little. The people have a lot of similarities, but they're from different tribes. Then we start to get into nationalities. Now you're talking about a whole different everything. You have this Arab marrying Hispanic, or you have this, Pakistani boy who wants to marry a Russian girl. Now it starts to get real, real, real awkward. Okay, because now you're going too far. But again, we'll find that in a lot of cases, people are a little bit more, they'll go through it, but eventually they'll settle. The deal breaker, the one that people will disown their family over, will want to kill their family members over, the level of hatred and fitna that takes place inside of a family or inside of a community is often unparalleled when you see somebody want to marry somebody Black, especially Black men. And this is just a reality. And I dare anybody listening online who's following, I dare anybody to prove me wrong. You can't. And I'm telling the brothers in advance right now, do anybody who gets offended, be very, very careful. You do not want any smoke with this topic. I'm telling you right now. I've been thinking and waiting to talk about this kind of topic at least 15 years of my life. At least 15 years. We telling the brothers right now, for the people, because people get bent out of shape and they start leaving in the post in the bottom of the poster in the blogs. Oh, Islam is it's not about race. What difference does it make? Our brother Najeeb Al Anjelesi already mentioned that Islam has nothing. There's no racism in Islam. But the Muslims themselves, their habits, just like there's no bid'ah in Islam. Islam doesn't have innovation, but the Muslims have bid'ah with them. Islam does not have sin and contradiction. But the Muslims, their speech has a lot of contradiction. Their speech, their behavior has a lot of sin. So when I talk about our religion, okay, we're talking about the Muslims and the choices that they make. So, we just want to give the brothers and sisters in advance, when you speak, it's time for us to stop sugarcoating it and running from these realities. These are realities, okay? And there's a lot of stuff, sometimes you find the brothers exaggerating. There are some people that they just attribute everything to racial injustice and so on and so forth. Every little thing, because they're racist. So the brothers don't want to put their foot next to mine because they're racist. No, that's because there's some people from Ahnaf who actually believe that feet shouldn't touch. Oh, they didn't, blah, blah, blah. They didn't do that. They didn't allow me. It's not always racism. So there are some people that are extreme and they're over the top, but that does not negate the fact that this is sad reality. So I just wanted to mention that, but from a scholastic standpoint, right? From an enemy standpoint, when we look at racism and its origin and how it came about, and that'll probably shed some more light on what it means to be racist or the whole racial views, or to see yourself superior to another, and where this kind of corrupt, evil thought may stem from. Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he wrote a book called Qasas al-Anbiya, a book that deals with the stories of the prophets, okay, which we're all familiar with. Alayhi salatu wassalam. So Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, in this book, one of the students of Sheikh Al-Albani, Salim al-Hilali, hafidhahullah, he made takhrij on the book. Of course, a lot of his statements and references were based on the works of our Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani, rahimahullah. And the book is an incredible book for the brothers who don't have it. It's called Sahih Qasas al-Anbiya, the authentication of the stories of the prophets, alayhim salatu wassalam. In that book, on page 16, there's a chapter, Hasadu Iblis li Adam alayhi salam. The jealousy that Iblis displayed towards Adam alayhi salatu wassalam. So Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he said, وَقَالَ فِي الْآيَةِ الْأُخْرَى, as he's continuing from another page, he said, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقَنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ قَالَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. This is so he cited some ayat or two verses from Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 11 and verse number 12, where he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, indeed, we have created you, ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ. then we've shaped you and fashioned you. Then we said to the angels, Usjudu li Adam, prostrate all of you to Adam. Fasajadu, they all prostrated except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated, meaning he disobeyed the commandment of Allah and did not prostrate to Adam. Qal, Allah asked Iblis, Ma man'aka alla tasjuda idh amartuka. What is it? What's the reason? What prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you to prostrate? Now listen to Shaitan's response. For you racist brothers and sisters, or have some racism in you, or have racist fathers or mothers or people inside your household, that instead of you advising them, you're sitting around pretending to go along the narrative because you don't want no smoke. You think birrul walidain is letting your parents be racist and prejudiced and commit sins. That's not birrul walidain. If you love your parents, you would take the Quran and take the Sunnah in a very beautiful, pleasant way, present to them the proofs and the evidences to show them that this behavior is despicable, right? Listen to the answer that Iblis gave, and I want us all to look into ourselves and see if we have any of this within us. قال أنا خير منه. I'm better than him. You made me from fire, and you made him from clay. قال الحسن البصري رحمه الله تعالى, he stated, he said, قاس إبليس وهو أول من قاس. Iblis, he compared things and he reached his own conclusion through a comparison. And he's the first person to do this. He's the first person to reach a conclusion in this matter, to make these kind of comparisons and to reach this kind of analogical deduction or analytical deduction. وقال محمد بن سيرين, he said, أول من قاس إبليس, the first one to behave like this, to have this kind of similarity and to reach a conclusion using this kind of method was Iblis. He said, وَمَا عُبِدَتِ الشَّمْسُ وَلَا الْقَمَرُ إِلَّا بِالْمَقَايِيسِ. And the sun and the moon were not worshipped, meaning people didn't reach the conclusion that they should worship the sun or the moon, except that they made these kind of comparisons. They allowed their minds to run away from them. In other words, the reason we're mentioning this is that racist people, what they often do, they allow themselves to become so delusional that they actually think that they're superior to these other people. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to just say something. I just want to bring something to the brother's attention. A lot of times you'll find someone that's racist. Like I know people, right? And I'm being straight. I'm being raw. If I get too raw, please stop me. I know people, right? I know brothers personally. They can't fight, like physically. They cannot fight. You can look at them. They have no fighting at all. Like you can punch him and break everything. That's it. He's done. Can't fight. Smoke a bunch of cigarettes. Drink. Everything about him. Barely makes salah. Despicable character. Rotten teeth. Don't teach his kids nothing about Islam. Horrible husband. Disrespect his wife. Horrible husband. Drinks khamr. Some of them even use drugs like crack. And that person will see himself better than you. He will look at himself and think that he's superior to you. Literally. Like literally. Will think that he is superior to you. Will think that if a Salafi, healthy, strong, handsome, clean, financially successful, educated, well-spoken, good family, come to ask for his daughter, that man, he's not good enough for his daughter. Now, his daughter may not even be really that religious. This brother comes, his reputation is better than his reputation than everybody in his whole family. But this brother, right, whose only reason why he has any value as a human being is because he's considered, inshallah, a person of tawheed in general, and because he's one of the creation of Allah, and we respect the general creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other than that, he has no significant value. But that person will consider himself to actually be superior to somebody else, right? And this is what Shaitan, when you look at Shaitan, he reached the conclusion that was inaccurate. And this is typical for the people who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentioned that al-ma'asi tusidu al-uqul, that sins, they corrupt the intellect. They cause a person to not be able to think straight and to reach accurate conclusions. So you find Shaitan actually thought that fire, which the ulama said, burns things, they destroy things. When you light fire, fire is dangerous. Fire harms, fire destroys, right? But Shaitan, because he was mentally was corrupted and he was plagued with this kind of, I saw himself to be superior to another creation from the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah actually honored. Shaitan reached a conclusion that was inaccurate. And he thought that him who was made from fire was more beneficial than clay or than dirt that seeds can be planted in and produced out of. So much benefit in the clay, in the dirt, in the earth. So much benefit, as the ulama say, that in general, when you really look at it from an intellectual point of view, the teen, the clay or the dirt or the earth, as they translate, is superior to the fire, right?
Let me step in for 1 second.
Go ahead, please.
First, I forgot to mention to the listening audience that I set the link. It has been set in the chat area for those that want to participate in the discussion, question, comment, concern, and other than that, then they can hit the link and enter the waiting room. And I think that I'll do it a little bit different tonight. I'll bring people in a discussion all throughout our discussion, inshallah, with the hopes that we can conclude early than going for about 3.5 hours long, because that has been certain people's sentiment is that we can get kind of lengthy in our discussions.
Right.
I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back to the initial question, and I'll just read 2 basic definitions concerning racism. The first definition that we find is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. So that's one definition. A second definition alludes to what our brother Ismail said: the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Now, we know that without a doubt, when looking at American history, this, without a doubt, is the type of racism that was practiced and instilled in white folks and Black folks. White folks in this country tried to instill in Black folks that they were inferior and that they were superior, and that they were inherently superior. And of course, the Bible was used to support a lot of that as well. But nowadays, and in fact, that's the same thing we did with more modern history. That's the same ideology Hitler held. The German, they had a term, the Aryan, the super Aryan, or it was something to this effect that Hitler used for the Aryans of Germany, the superior German, or whatever the case may be. But when we look at the Muslims, then I think that the first definition, without a doubt, will probably apply for a lot of Muslims that have racism with them, that they have a prejudice or discrimination or antagonism directed to a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular race or ethnicity. And typically, that race or ethnicity is a minority or a marginalized group, especially after entering America. Like so many people, so many non-Muslims, some Muslims adopt the thinking of the overall society. And so because Black people generally speaking, are considered to be on the low end of the totem pole, a certain status, then a lot of Muslims adopt that same understanding and exhibit it with their brothers and sisters in Islam that may be of that same race or ethnic group, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. So the initial question was dealing with racism and is it hizbiyah? Because again, we know that at-tahazzub is a munkar, is a evil, and it's an evil that we have to eliminate. So I'll direct the question to our brother Sadiq. When looking at and hearing these two general definitions of racism, and of course, we'll get to the point that, or we'll get to the topic of first, we know there's different types of racism, and then there are subcategories of racism. That's understood. Or it may not be understood to the general listening audience, but we'll touch on some of those things for clarity. But right now, we're dealing with the fact, or we're dealing with the issue, is racism a form of Hizbiyah? So I'll pass the mic to the brother Sadiq and have him give his point of view on that, inshallah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, wa man tamassaka bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin, thumma amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah ala ni'mati al-Islam wa sunnah. All praise and thanks belong to Allah for guiding us to Islam and for guiding us to the Sunnah. I want to thank the brothers for inviting me back on once again to speak about some very important topics. May Allah Ta'ala reward each and every one of you tremendously. And this is, of course, after thanking Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for giving us this opportunity. To answer the question, we have to look at what is Hizbiyah. And with understanding the definition of Hizbiyah, then perhaps we will have a better understanding and can see the connection between the two, racism and Hizbiyah, partisanship. The ulama, they explain that Hizbiyah, the simplest definition of it is to have love, hatred, loyalty, and disloyalty for other than the truth. In other words, put, to have love, hatred, loyalty, disloyalty for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that you're not loving an individual for the sake of Allah, nor hating for the sake of Allah, nor having loyalty and disloyalty for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we look at this and we examine racism, we find that the racist, they have a lot of different characteristics and things that are particular unto them. But from them is that they share this trait of Hizbiyah, this partisanship, where their love, their hatred, their loyalty, and their disloyalty is based on their race. It's not based on Allah said, it's not based on the Prophet ﷺ said, it's not based on the Sahaba said, it's not based on anything outside of their race. This person is from our race, we like this person immediately. This person is not from our race, we have disdain for this person immediately. So, bila shak wa bila raib, when one looks at the characteristics of the racist and things that are indicative of a racist, they see that the racists have very despicable characteristics. This within itself should make everyone run away from ever wanting to be remotely connected to or attached to racism, because it is a most despicable and lowly way. Hizbiyah is despicable. We all know this. One of the despicable traits and fruits of Hizbiyah is that it prevents an individual from reaching the truth. It's a hindrance from the truth, because one will side with falsehood because it falls in line with their party, or one will try to fight against good because it's in the best interest of their party. And this is something that I want all of the Muslims to know, black, white, whatever tone of your skin, whatever color of your hue, I want you all to realize this, is that these things are never justified. Racism is never justified. And racism is always a hindrance in overall development and overall progress. And I'm saying this because there are certain individuals who their response to racism is to become racist. They fight racism with racism because of this particular group being racist towards a particular group, then they will support falsehood because it falls in line in their short view, in their short-sightedness. It falls in line with their overall objective in overcoming and conquering this particular thing. So when we look at this, I caution the Muslims to never allow race or racial tension or some racial injustice. Never allow this to become fuel for you to support falsehood. Never allow this to become a means for you or to become a reason for you to in turn support things that you know are not correct. Because the reality of it is that which will be the cure for racism is applying Islam. If Islam is applied, that will be the cure for racism. For homework, I ask that everyone, and as a challenge for those who may have any doubt in this, to look back to Surah Al-Hujurat. Look to the tafsir of Surah Al-Hujurat. Just read Surah Al-Hujurat and contemplate over its meanings. And you will see inside of this one chapter, and it's all throughout the Quran, but you will see inside of this one chapter that which destroys this concept of racism, that which destroys this concept of any justification that anybody will have to speak bad about someone based upon their race, to make up names and disrespectful names about individuals based upon their race, and so on and so forth, and to feel any type of superiority over other based upon race. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear that those who have, or those who are the best from amongst you, they are those who have the most taqwa. Those who have the most taqwa, those who fear Allah the most. What is taqwa? Taqwa is to do what Allah has commanded you to do and to stay away from what Allah Ta'ala has commanded you to stay away from. Taqwa is to fulfill the obligations in which Allah Ta'ala has made it binding upon you to fulfill and to stay away from the prohibitions. When one looks at this, they realize that what makes an individual better than another individual is due to their taqwa, due to how obedient they are unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That has nothing to do with the color of your skin, has nothing to do with your mother tongue, has nothing to do with the land that you're from, has nothing to do with the texture of your hair, nor the color of your eyes, nor any of this nonsense. But it's about taqwa. So when you look at this from this standpoint and you realize that racism has even the remotest of connections to Hizbiyyah, this is something that especially the individuals who claim to be upon the Sunnah should have nothing to do with in any which way, shape, or form. No.
What I want to do, inshallah, because when looking at the issue of racism, and there being racist Muslims, I think that for one, this needs to be as educational as possible. And so that's why I read off those definitions of racism, but there are different categories of racism. And I think that some of these categories, like I'll give you an example, you don't find in many cases overt racism from some Muslims, but you find other forms of racism, and it's clear to see, but sometimes because it's not identified or it's not looked at as some of the textbook definitions that we may see, commonly found, people may try to dismiss qualities and or characteristics of racism amongst the Muslims. And so when looking at racism has varying aspects. So I want to, just go through some of the aspects, three specifically, because I believe that these three, we find these in Muslims. And I'll get to the point of why I say what I say. So the first type we have is aversive racism. Aversive racism. And aversive racism is a form of implicit racism. Now, implicit, what's intended by that, it's that which is implied but not plainly expressed. So it's not overt, it's not manifest. So the definition continues, it's a form of implicit racism in which a person's unconscious negative evaluations of racial or ethnic minorities are realized by a persistent avoidance of interaction with other racial and ethnic groups. Now I'm going to read that again so it could be soaked in, because I see the smile on Ismail's face. So his wheels are spinning when he heard the definition. We definitely see this among some Muslims. Even if some Muslims don't walk out the door and say, he's a this, he's a nigger, he's a spick, he's a this, he's a that. That would be considered overt racism to display it in this manner. So I'm gonna read this definition one more time, inshallah. Aversive racism is a form of implicit racism. Implicit is something that is not overt or manifest, in which a person's unconscious negative evaluations of racial or ethnic minorities are realized by a persistent avoidance of interaction with other racial and ethnic groups. Now, here is another way that same type of racism is explained. It is to describe the subtle racial behaviors of any ethnic or racial group who rationalize their aversion to a particular group by appeal to rules or stereotypes. By appeal to rules or stereotypes. Now, that's one definition, and I'm going to read the other two definitions, and I'm going to come back to that with real life examples, inshallah, because, I entered somebody into the, I'm gonna put them in a waiting room. So I'm gonna come back to that particular form, that particular type, because I want to read these other two, and then I want to go back and kind of get a little controversial with this topic. In other words, I'm going to pull the cap wide off. I think so far, I mean, you know, I want to pull the cap right off. It's going to get a little controversial, but it's for the betterment of our situation, inshallah. So that's the first type. The second type is what you call color blindness. And this color blindness in relation to racism, color blindness is the disregard of racial characteristics in social interaction. For example, in the rejection of affirmative action as a way to address the results of past patterns of discrimination. That's an example of color blindness, right? Continues. Critics of this attitude argue that by refusing to attend to racial disparities, racial color blindness, in fact, unconsciously perpetuates the pattern that produced racial inequality. So it's, in a nutshell, it's one of those type of people that act like that's not there, that we don't need to come up with solutions because it's really not there anyway. And that's similar to me, as far as I'm concerned, when people keep yelling, there is no racism in Islam. As if it's not there. When we're yelling, there is no racism in Islam, that means now we're not addressing the racist Muslim. That's what that consequently means. Look at when the whole Black Lives Matter movement took place over several Black individuals that were killed in the society. And we're not talking about the organization Black Lives Matter, we're talking about the basic slogan. Why would you have Muslim imams getting on minbars, doing khutbahs, addressing the situation of racial tension in the US, getting on a minbar and making statements like all lives matter? When this, in defiance of the statement Black Lives Matter, when Black Lives Matter, the statement, not the organization, but the statement was a political statement in showing or stating that, look, we're dealing in this country, Black lives are treated in a way that is that not like other people are treated. It's treated in a way where our lives are insignificant and can be taken without consequence. So the very statement Black Lives Matter doesn't now somehow mean to say that Black lives matter, that other lives don't matter. For Muslims to now come, yani, with that right-wing talking point, all lives matter, as a refutation to that statement, when that statement had a clear meaning. Anyway, color blindness at an individual level, people with colorblind prejudice reject racist ideology, but also reject systematic policies intended to fix institutional racism. And I believe that when you have imams on YouTube making statements like all lives matter, they definitely were suffering from this whole color blindness type situation that's being described here. But then we have a third type that I believe is important for our discussion tonight, and that is cultural racism. That is cultural racism. And cultural racism manifests as societal beliefs and customs that promote the assumption that the products of a given culture, including the language and traditions of that culture, are superior to those of other cultures. It shares a great deal with xenophobia, which is often characterized by fear of or aggression toward members of an out-group by members of an in-group. Members of an out-group by members of an in-group. And this particular cultural racism can be characterized by the belief that one culture is inherently superior to another. And we see that, and we see this in certain groups of Muslims here in the US. I have to say this, but notably, we find a lot of our Somali brothers with this type of cultural racism. Even so much so, from what I was told by some of the Somali brothers, they even deal with each other like that, depending on what tribe you're from, and thus forth and so on. So the reason why I'm saying bringing these types of racism, reading these types of racism off, is because it is far-fetched for any Muslim to say that these types of racism don't exist with some Muslims, especially in this day and time where this type of different forms of these types of racism have been expressed not by the general common people from amongst from amongst the Muslims, regardless of what ethnic group that you're from, but these types of sentiments have been expressed by people, by du'at, who are considered to be religious figures and religious leaders, and people who are followed by multitudes of people from their country or from their tribesmen or kinsmen or whatever the case may be. So I'm gonna give a real life example and stop beating around the bush for a second and give a real life example. There's the UK da'i, Abu Hasnain Ibrahim. Now he supposedly apologized, so I'm not, if he truly apologized and made Tawbah, I'm not using this against him per se, but this is an example of a statement that was clearly racist, where when a couple of years back, about 3 years ago, he was addressing, and I'm not sure what his ethnic background is. He looked Indo-Pak to me, but I could be mistaken. But he was addressing, giving a maw'idah one evening, I believe it was after the Eid. It looked like it was nighttime. He was giving an address to some of the brothers in the streets. And during the address, he made a statement similar to the effect, brothers, we're not Black. Let's stop talking like we're Black. Let's talk in a decent way with decent manners. And the point that I'm making is that if racism doesn't exist amongst the Muslims, then how can a statement like this be made? Not from an Ammi who may not even read the Quran, months may go by before they even read the Quran. This was by a religious figure, a person who's looked up to, questions are returned back to, questions are sought from. He's the example from amongst the people in his locality of righteousness. And he made this statement because there's only one thing that you can infer from what he said. Let's talk in a decent way with decent manners. So to talk, quote unquote, Black is indecent and is bad mannered. But what he meant is the thug culture that you find some Black folks living in. But thug culture is not Black culture. Thug culture is not Black culture. And for a person who's a leader over multitudes of Muslims, you would have thought that he would have been a little bit more better at choosing his words. And Allah knows best, this could be an example of aversive racism seeping out. Another example is the Somali brother in Canada, Saeed. Saeed.
Begin with R.
Yeah, Saeed. Yeah, whatever. Saeed something with the R. Begins with
But I know you're talking about. Tall brother.
Yeah. And he gave a khutbah, and basically, Black people don't know their fathers. He made an insinuation that Black people don't know their fathers. These are statements. How can a person make this is a totally ignorant statement. So even if you're trying to convince your congregation that, look, we as Muslims, we have guidance and we should be marrying. And we shouldn't be like people in the West that fall into zina. Falling into zina doesn't necessarily mean that the people who have fallen into zina don't know their fathers. Anyway, it was just a wild statement. It was a wild statement. And I believe that these are examples of aversive racism, or in some cases, cultural racism. And these are two examples, not from any Joe Schmo from amongst the community of people, but these are from their religious figures, people who people look up to. Now, he apologized too. I must make that clear. He apologized. I'm only bringing these and showing these examples that, look, we see aspects of this, not from the Amni, from amongst the people. We see this from religious figures. And so if we see this from religious figures that have these type of understandings, then it's not far-fetched that the ignorant from amongst the people will have these types of crooked understandings. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. So I'll say that, and I'll let the brothers respond, inshallah.
Well, what I want to say in response to that, this whole concept of you know, and if you notice that the examples that you gave, and I know you well enough to know that that wasn't necessarily because you were trying to demonize people or make anyone look like, you know, they're just this campaign against Black people or to be negative against Black people. But when racism, when you use the examples, you don't really find these kind of things as prevalent as you do when it comes to Black people, right? Now that's just it's a sad reality. Now the fact that I'm Black, it doesn't change. It's not going to make me uncomfortable, just like it's not going to make you uncomfortable to use both those examples. Now the second example is from a Black man, right? Somebody who's a little bit lighter than us, like he's a regular Black. Nobody's going to mistake him. He can't go nowhere and blend in, put on a certain outfit and then mix in with everybody else and then be Black when it's necessary, and then be whatever else you want to be when that's convenient for him too. This is a regular old Black man. You understand what I'm trying to say? There's no doubt, if you see him walking down the street regularly, you're not going to think he's anything else but that. If African-American who's never, or people who have never been exposed to any other people, any other Black people besides African-American was to see that brother walking down the street, the second brother you mentioned, they would think he's African-American. You understand what I'm trying to say? So brothers are not just trying to make this discussion about Black people being mistreated. But if you notice that just the two examples that Najeeb gave off the top of his head, two examples that he produced, it's most of the time when the topic of racism comes up, the majority of the time, it's talking about racism that's towards Black people. All right. And that's just a sad thing. There's other kind of racism. There's reverse racism, like Najeeb mentioned, Barakallahu fihi, or I just said I mentioned, Barakallahu fihi, where, you know, someone, you know, you find a lot of brothers doing that now, especially after the whole George Floyd incident. You know, Black people got upset, they frustrated naturally. The stuff the police do and the way people get treated, all this stuff that was going on, you know, within the last couple of years in the country. You know, social media, you could just sit there and just scroll cops harassing Black people, beating Black people up, shooting them, a bunch of people, you know, kicking Black people out of the neighborhood, all kind of stuff. Then you see it once in a while, some people from, you know, South America and different places like that getting mistreated, people, immigrants getting mistreated, all different kind of things like that, right? And there's reverse racism. People get so mad that they start to hate white people. Or for the Black Muslims who are victims of prejudice or racism, they get so mad that they start to hate people from other nationalities. I know some brothers who were mistreated, so they were treated so poorly when they first accepted Islam and they went to masjids, maybe places where they were predominantly Palestinian or Pakistani or wherever the brothers were from. There was a bunch of them Egyptian, and they went to those masajid, and the way that they, you know, the warm embrace that they anticipated, they didn't get. They felt left out. And Black people, a lot of times, African Americans, especially the older ones, they got a chip on their shoulder, rightfully so. But, you know, when you're a Muslim, you have to keep it balanced. But they do have a chip on their shoulder where, you know, they get so paranoid or so sensitive that anything that's done to them, and it feels like it's some injustice involved, they immediately assume it's because they're Black. Sometimes
let me cut in for 1 second with that point. Because I'm gonna say this because I don't want that point to be lost.
Right.
But I think when you're dealing with our elders,
right,
that especially even us, when we deal with our elders, and I'm talking about the brothers, the brothers. I'm talking about Muslims. Right? I'm not talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about, you know,
Muslims.
not for the people that may be listening, not you. But when we deal with our elders from amongst the brothers and sisters that accepted Islam, people who were in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, like this, I think that one, the youth, ourselves and those who are younger than us, and brothers of other ethnicities as well, have to understand, and I think this is where there is a disconnect. You have to understand what they experienced.
Exactly. That's why I said rightfully so.
Yeah, you know? You have to understand
Right.
what they've experienced,
Trauma. It's
for
trauma.
you to
Dealing with some
understand
post-trauma.
exactly, for you to understand where their thinking is today.
Mhm.
When I was in Montgomery, Alabama, I was some of the administration of the masjid that I was attending on a daily basis. They were elders. The imam, the resident imam, was in his 80s. The secretary was not as old as him, but he was like within my father's peer group, in his 60s. And so when I had talks with these brothers and other elders that were in that community, you'll be surprised at things. Well, you won't be surprised because they're 80 in the South. He grew old in the South. But when they talk to you about the things that they've experienced,
Yeah.
People have to understand that this is a lot of times why they look at things like this.
Right.
Because they were living, they were in their 20s and
Dealing with
30s at a time when racism amongst the society was overt.
Right.
They may have been people that were in those marches that you see on those black and white films when the dogs were being sicked on them and the water hoses were being turned on them.
Exactly. And see, this is what I mean. Like a lot of brothers, the older brothers, they accepted Islam, and they were taught. A lot of them accepted Islam by way of the dawah of Malcolm X, rahimahullah ta'ala, and one of the things that he mentioned in his dawah was that he saw that there were, that the whole concept of white supremacy or black supremacy or nationalism was a concept that Islam was for, right? So that that kind of it made sense to them. So when they came to Islam, they didn't anticipate, just like myself when I was a teenager and my family accepted Islam, I didn't anticipate the racism that I experienced myself, right? Me myself, I'm saying personally, racism I experienced myself, and it wasn't a whole lot, but it was enough, and it was completely and totally crazy. And the only reason why I ain't really wild out is because I'm a Muslim. If it wasn't for the fact that I understood also from Islam, I would have been wilding. It would have been a bad situation in the masjid or wherever we was at, because some of the stuff, you're not expecting that stuff catches you off guard to see a Muslim, especially when it's overt, or they'll say something crazy and sideways. But nonetheless, a lot of the brothers experienced that. Now, in my opinion, I think it was mixed. I think that they actually did experience some racism, and their senses, their antennas are already up because, as you mentioned, what they've been through. So when they go to a place and they pick up a certain kind of energy from the people, and it looks like the people are being a little standoffish. One brother said one time, it was a Syrian brother. I was in a masjid that's predominantly Palestinian. And he told me, he said, when I first came to the United States, they told me, watch out for the black people. You know what I'm saying? They said, watch out for the black people. Now, they ain't telling them watch out for the Ku Klux Klan and people that was, hanging people in trees and burning them and skinning them alive and castrating them. They ain't say watch out for none of them. They told them watch out for the black people. You know what I'm trying to say? And this is common. But my point, that wasn't even my point. My point is that this whole view, the way people size other people up and measure themselves against those people and deem themselves to be superior, this is the main problem. Like Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he said, أكثر الضلال الناس إنما هو بسبب القياس الفاسد. He said most of the reasons why people deviate, the things that cause people to deviate, most of the going astray of human beings is because of no other reason other than their calculation and the way they measured something and put something together, comparison that they made, the conclusion that they reached was inaccurate. They did it in a way that it was inaccurate. So instead of you looking at a person, let's say, for example, racism is one of the primary reasons why so many women are unhappy in their marriages. Now, I can't tell you in the 10 years that I've been, that I was the imam, the amount of women that I've actually spoke to on the phone who literally would tell you that they can't stand their husband. They do not like their husband. They never wanted to marry their husband from the beginning. They were forced to marry their husband. One woman said her husband literally makes them sick. makes her sick. Like just from the time she met him, the entire marriage, he makes her sick, right? But the fathers were they only got married. They didn't get married for no Islamic. Listen, I'm telling you right now, I can't think off the top of my head one marriage that I know from people from other nationalities. I'm not talking about reverts, because reverts, they have a different set of problems. We can talk about that another time. Reverts got a separate set of issues that they have to fix within themselves.
Because we need to do like 10 more marriage episodes.
Right. Reverts got a whole different set of issues. But when it comes to people from other countries, from the Arab countries, from the sub-Indian continent, places like that, and even in certain places within the continent of Africa, a lot of these people, they don't have a choice of who they're gonna marry, right? And the fathers, a lot of the fathers are just ignorant. They don't understand Islam. And again, I challenge any listener to prove me wrong. I challenge you. And that's not a statement of arrogance. I'm just confident based off my experience. Okay, so these women, they get put in a situation where they have to marry men they don't want to marry. They're marrying these men based off of the fact that these men are from their same race. Now, we know we have statements from the ulama that say, oh, well, it's good for women to marry or people to marry within their same culture because of the cultural similarities. That makes sense. But a lot of these women who were getting married were women that were born and raised in the United States that were forced to marry men in their countries back home. Okay, so they don't have the same exact culture. The fathers and the mothers think because I'm from this country, I'm from that country, my kids are the same way. Your kid been going to public school their whole life. They've been listening to rap music, Jay-Z, Biggie, all these different kinds of people. They done memorized every song, done danced to every song. When you wasn't looking, they was upstairs in your house dancing, partying, doing all this kind of stuff, watching TV, binge watching basketball, football, baseball, all of this stuff the whole time. All Beverly Hills 902 and all those shows that was going on in the 90s and the early 2000s. You think that that's the same girl that's in the village in some way in one of the Indian countries or somewhere in one of the Arab countries? That's an American girl, right? That's just the reality. And we already know when it comes to pop culture and urban culture and being cool, this is a fact. And I would say this if I had blonde hair and blue eyes. Black people, for example, have dominated that whole culture, pop culture. Just like, there are people from the continent of Asia that have dominated the IT world, right? There are people from other countries who've dominated the world of mathematics and so on and so forth. When it comes to being cool, having style, pop culture, setting trends, there's nobody in the history of the United States that did that more than Black people. So when these girls grow up watching TV and they see these people running around, playing basketball, looking cool, and your sons be sitting about watching, look, their sons got on fitted hats, Nike sweatsuits, they in the park doing pull-ups, right? Doing wheelies on motorcycles with their fitted hat on backwards. Where do you think they got that stuff from? Huh? From Sana'a? From Mecca? From Medina? From Sudan? From Djibouti? That's stuff that people get from here. That's part of the ta'aruf. Us coming together as people and benefiting from one another. This is the purpose, as the ulama said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, right? The ulama said that without ta'aruf, if one person was responsible for everybody, we wouldn't be able to get things done. One person is not going to have enough knowledge and enough life experience to get all the things done on the planet Earth that needs to be done. So the ta'aruf, us coming together with different cultures and different backgrounds, being able to mesh and benefit from each other. You might be a little corny. This other person is cool. He's going to show you how to be cool. You may be a little bit academic. This other person is not as academic. You're going to show him how to be academic. You may be real whack when it comes to how to deal with women. You know how to deal with your wife. This other brother knows how. He's going to show you how to deal with women. Everybody's going to come together and benefit from one another so that society can get what it needs to get done. So when you find a human being who, with the fact that so many Muslims, sadly, due to our lack of education and knowledge, we miss the purpose of us being different. And we allow shaitan to get involved and set this trend and got us thinking that, oh, we're superior and this other group of people are inferior for whatever reason. And we actually we developed a system based on that. So now, when it comes time to make any decision, we're making a decision with that in our minds. So when I'm great marrying my daughter off, I'm not thinking about marrying my daughter off to somebody based off of his deen, based off of his character. right? Based off his iman and what I see from him apparently in his fear for, as a relation to his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm marrying him based off the fact that I think me and my people are superior. And as we mentioned, a lot of times the people are delusional. Because if you really look, there are people, I'm telling you that people, and you brothers know this, there are people who in this world, on this planet, who are poor. I'm talking about dirt poor, but will not marry their daughter to another person from a different tribe or from a different nationality, and definitely nobody black, but from a different tribe and different nationality, because that person's great-great-grandfather had less social status than him. My great-great-grandfather was considered a man of prestige. Your great-great-grandfather was considered a man of inferiority. Now, I'm rich, your village is poor. You still too good for me. Because of this inaccurate, qiyas, this qiyas al-fasid, this corrupt and inaccurate, conclusion that they reach, the way they compare things and the way they reach conclusions, right? So for the Muslim, if he returns back to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he realizes inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the people who have the most status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are considered to be the best, who are considered to be the most noble and the most prestigious, are the ones that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most. Then we'll start to make a qiyas that is sahih, one that is correct. And we'll measure people and base our decisions and our comparisons on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals, and who from amongst us is trying his hardest or appears to be trying their hardest to adhere to those things. But sadly, that's not what the Muslims are. The Muslims, sadly, are comfortable with their nonsense. And it's so deep that you mention those different kinds of racism, because I tell you right now, I know a couple of situations, right, where I call people out on it. I think that's one of the reasons why the brothers didn't renew my contract, because I started to get at these issues. You understand what I'm trying to say? And I started to take certain stand to those issues, and it started to get a little bit too political. You understand what I'm trying to say? Some of it started to get too political. And I think that's one of the things that made some of the people uncomfortable, right? But nonetheless, when you bring up these issues, wallahi, akhi, I'm telling you, bring up these issues, brothers get so uncomfortable. They get so uncomfortable. And honestly, that covert, backdoor, sneaky, like you really got to be sharp to point it out, racism. I don't know how the Muslims got that science down pat, but they are masters when it comes to being, having these racist issues and so on and so forth, and not really letting nobody not letting nobody know that they like that. The only time it becomes overt is when somebody daughter marries somebody black. Now I'm telling you, again, I can give you a list of examples. This is from 10 years of concentrated. I wasn't in New York. I wasn't in somewhere Idaho, out in Nebraska in the woods. I was in one of the biggest multicultural places on the planet, dealing with people from all different nationalities. You can marry anything is forgiven. Not just recently, a sister got excommunicated because she married outside of her nationality. When I heard about it, you know what I said? I said, they're going to come back from that. It's a little beef right now. They'll come back from that. You know why? Because she didn't do this. She didn't break the golden rule. No matter what you do, you better not marry no black man. Because the family will you're done. This is a reality. And I challenge anybody to come and prove me wrong. And don't give me no few. We're not talking about for the religious people, the people that really have embraced this part of Islam that has nothing to do with color. It has everything to do with Islam. It has everything to do with taqwa. And we're not talking about people like that. We're talking about the average, where the average Muslim has no problem with this. This is a reality. And the fact that Muslims are walking around, dancing around the issue, trying to act like it doesn't exist. And I'm not racist because look, a Ramadan, I come and I sit down and we all eat chicken in the same room and our children play together. Listen, nobody's stupid here. Like at the end of the day, and for the record, this is not, this isn't about marriage, and it's not because, one group of nationality, nationality.
You're basically saying that's when it's spotted. That's basically
this is because at the end of the day, wallahi, there are Muslims who I believe they don't even realize, as you mentioned in I need you to send that to me. Because wallahi, this is a reality. Muslims don't realize, a lot of them don't realize that this is their case. The only time it becomes overt and they get like really like that is if something triggers that and they start to call names and stuff like that. For the most part, I think every Muslim would deny that they're like this. I don't think there's any Muslim that be like, yeah, I'm like this, and would deny. The stuff that I know, Ikhwan, wallahi, man, I wish I could mention it, but it's gonna out so many people. It'll ruin communities if I tell you the stuff that I've heard.
Well, we'll get to that for 1 second. We got the first caller in. Princess Aisha, make sure that however you're listening to this, your YouTube is turned down, inshallah. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'm listening to this and it's a trigger because it takes me back to when I first took my Shahada, and I'm from New York. And like the brother Ismail said, multicultural, everybody's there. It's a melting pot. And I remember being embraced in my community. But when I went to other masajids or if I'm walking around in the city, it's not the same kind of vibe. And I remember this African brother in particular, he asked me where I was from. And I said, I'm from New York. I'm from here, born and raised. And he's like, and you're Muslim? And I'm like, yes, I'm Muslim. He said, no, you're not Muslim. He was like, you're not real Muslim. I said, I don't know what real Muslim means, but I took Shahada. You know, I believe in Allah and his messenger. And the last day I'm Muslim. I pray 5 times a day. Like, I don't understand. He was like, no, Black people like to be in clubs. Y'all like to get high. Y'all like to drink. And I'm like, excuse you? Like, so Islam just came to everybody except for Black people. Is that what you're trying to say? He said, no, I'm just really surprised. And he was like, wow. He was like, I want to marry you. I said, I would never marry an ignorant person like you. Like, why would I want to marry somebody like you when this is your view of my people? I couldn't believe it. And then like one time in the cab, another brother, he's telling me that I'm not really Muslim because I'm not Arab. He's Arab. And I said, okay, well, have you memorized the Quran? And he was like, well, no, I don't know how to read the Quran. I said, but you're Arab. You're telling me I'm not Muslim because I'm not Arab, but I can read the Quran and I've memorized from the Quran. And you haven't memorized anything and you're from an Arab speaking country and you can't even read the book of Allah. So, you know, another thing with this racism in Islam is that a lot of times these cultures and these ethnicities, they don't know where this racism comes from. A lot of their countries were invaded by the British. And that narrative that they stick to about Black people, about African Americans, comes from that. And they stand up with pride when they say that they can speak French. You know, you got this sister I met from Chad, and she was like, yeah, I speak multiple languages. I speak the language of my country, but I also speak French. And I'm like, do you know that's because your country was invaded by France? That's not something, you know, they came in and they took what was yours and they had you downtrodden. They forced you to speak their language. So at the end of the day, while they're sitting here looking at us as if we're weak because of what we went through, y'all went through the same thing we went through. Y'all just was still at home going through that. You know what I'm saying? But y'all went through the same thing that we went through. Y'all not better than anybody. But when you start talking to them like that, it's sensitive now. It's like, wait, well, hold up. I mean, yeah, we got invaded, but we got our independence. When they told you could have it, us too. You know what I'm saying? So when we break it down and really talk about where it stems from, I think that would help a lot in the communities, because that hidiness that they feel about their tribe or their country or their culture, y'all was stripped of y'all things too. So that's all I wanted to say. Jazakallah khair.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, you know, to piggyback off what the sister was saying, basically, all of this is why I say you really can't. I remember I did a video. I don't recall the exact title, but it was dealing with the eradication of white supremacy. And white supremacy cannot be eradicated without Tawheed. Because this type of thinking and this white supremacy, that's like when you're dealing with going back in history, slavery, of course, as we know, was always a worldwide issue. Every ethnicity, every enslaved themselves and other ethnicities. But at one point in history, as we know, and maybe some people don't know, at one point in history, the Catholic Church switched it from being how it was to being race-based, slavery being race-based. Because at one point, the church would enslave people who they fought, captives of war, or people who were just not Christian. And if somebody was considered to be Christian or Catholic or whatever the case may be, they usually would have had to free them. The point is that so they made it race-based, and they started to indoctrinate their followers with inferiority and superiority characteristics and traits and dogma. And so now the sons of Ham, who are destined to be the slaves of their brothers, Shem and Japheth, if I'm even pronouncing that right, then they were the superior and the children of Ham were the inferior. And they basically went all through Africa with that ideology, as the sister was mentioning. West Africa, they sent slaves from West Africa to the Americas. And then in Africa, they just carved it up. And so one of the things that she was saying that that I definitely agree with is that a lot of times we have to understand how these things came to be, the past, in order for us to deal with its remnants today. We can't effectively address a lot of these things without looking at how it came about initially. And so when we have Muslims that are in Muslim countries that were once colonized and like this, then they have to understand too that you are still suffering from an ideology that is firmly rooted in kufr. It's firmly rooted in kufr. And one of the things that when we accept Islam, we don't just accept the theology, but we accept a different outlook on life that we get that's derived from the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. And when we do that, then we'll start looking at things differently, especially as it relates to internalized racism that may be within us. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. I think that was a good point the sister made. Walillah alhamd.
No, well, Allah Ta'ala reward her tremendously. It's important, and I just want to reiterate that these things have to be pointed out from the standpoint that individuals, in order to fix a problem, you have to first acknowledge that the problem is there, and there are a lot of brothers who refuse to do this. Now, there are some, and this could be because they're just naive, so they refuse to see it because they're naive, and then there are others who it's not so much that they refuse to see it, but they don't want to admit it because on some level they know that they are guilty of it, right? But in any event, it is important that we have a little more sensitivity for each other and that we accept what individuals are telling us about these things that are happening, these things that are taking place, that we don't just, throw their stories to the side and say, no, that doesn't exist because of X, Y, and Z. Now, there are a few traits and things that are indicative of the racists that I truly want everyone to really look at, right? Our brother, Ismail, he mentioned one, that the people are delusional, right? And they have this false sense of superiority, even in cases where that's clearly not the case, as in when Iblis said, I'm better than him, when clearly he was not. So you have individuals that suffer from this type of delusion where they truly think that they are superior to others when they're clearly not, right? And this works both ways. Right? This works both ways. So you have individuals who they may, and when I mean both ways, I mean that you have individuals who are racist towards Black people, right? Let's talk about Black people in particular. And then you have Black people who are racist towards Black people. You have individuals who are racist towards Black people, and then you have black people who are racist towards others, towards white people, and so on and so forth. What got me going back to that guy that y'all mentioned up there in Canada, right? Who is black? He looks black, right? But speaks ill of black people, is because that individual does not identify as being black. And I believe if he were to be called black, and if not him as particularly, but many who are like him, if they were to be called black, he will correct you very fast and tell you, no, I'm not black, I'm Somali. Right. So that was on my mind. So I want to say that, and that's it. That's all I want to say on that. In any event, right? In any event, the racist person is delusional, right? So if we had to sum it up, what are some reasons of why you don't want to be racist? Is because a racist person is delusional. Like in that case, I'm better than you, right? A racist person is a person because racism makes you stupid. And this is the reality. Racism makes you stupid, makes you dumb, because the racist is an individual who in reality, they are blaming someone else for that which is not in him, right? They're blaming a person for something that he is not guilty of, or they're blaming a person for something that within itself is not blameworthy. Let me give you some real life examples. When I was in Egypt, you had individuals who were there who were ill affected by the British, and they were individuals who they looked down upon others based upon the color of their skin. Okay. These individuals, often they would try to insult us by calling us Sudani. They will say, you Sudani. And that was supposed to be an insult. I was supposed to hurt my feelings because he called me Sudani. So of course, at first, I didn't know what they meant by that, by calling me Sudani. So I would say, no, and I'm Riki, right? And they would say, no, Sudani. So they'll make up songs and, foolishness, right? Based upon this. But one looks at this, is calling someone Sudani an insult? Is that an insult that a person Sudani? Of course not. How is that even an insult? You understand? But this is indicative of a person who's racist, is that they will blame you for something that's not even blameworthy. They will blame you for something that's not within you. You don't even have that characteristic. Like those who categorize individuals as being lazy. Black people are lazy. Black people, they like to go to clubs. Black people, they like to drink. Black people like to do whatever, to the end of it. As if this is indicative of all black people, as if these characteristics and traits are shared by everybody who's black. I'm black. I never been to a club before in my life. So now I'm not really black, or I'm not, like, how does that work now? How does that work? So blaming individuals for characteristics that they themselves are free from, or like the individual said, and then he had to turn around and apologize. Black people don't know their fathers. Is that the case? Black people don't know their fathers? Is this even accurate? This categorization is accurate? The stereotype, is it accurate? And of course, like most stereotypes, they're not accurate at all, especially when applied to the masses of individuals. But yet they are put on individuals as if they are true. And what is this? Except what? Blaming a person for characteristics that they do not possess. And undoubtedly, this is from the traits of Jahiliyyah. Blaming a person for the mistakes of other than him. Now, as Muhammad Abdul Wahhabi mentions in Masail Jahiliyyah, that from the traits of Jahiliyyah is that you blame a person for something that is not in him. You blame a person for a trait that others possess, not him, but others possess, and you blame him with that trait. This is from Jahiliyyah. This is from the pre-Islamic ignorance. But you have many individuals who they're afflicted by this. Right. So we have to identify these things, that these things exist. And we don't talk about them just to highlight them. We don't talk about them just to be provocative. We don't talk about them just because it is fashionable, right, to talk about these type of things. No, we speak about them because these are issues that have to be fixed. These are affairs that have to be fixed. These are things that people have to change amongst themselves. And in particular, the Muslims have to use the book and the Sunnah to correct their behavior, to correct their mentality, to correct the brainwashing that the kuffar colonists had put upon them. They have to correct this. And if they don't identify and acknowledge that it exists, then they're not going to be able to correct it. Do you understand? I mean, I have brothers who, and granted, I understand, if you don't walk around looking like me, then you will never truly understand my experience. So I understand that there are people that they're never going to truly understand. They're not going to see everything that I see. I understand that, and I get it. But the point is that those brothers out there, you got to believe me when I tell you this is the case in what I have experienced. I can only speak from my own experiences. I know brothers who are white. I know white brothers who have converted to Islam or reverted to Islam, and they were treated racist. They were treated racist by others. Now, they were treated racist by others and other groups who still will call them ajnabi and all this type of stuff. You understand? And then when the brother told me, I was astonished. I said, but you're white, and they treated you like that? Even you couldn't get a pass? I mean, so subhanallah, right? So we got some people out there that got they got some real serious racism with them. The point is that certain people are not going to see it. Certain people don't want to see it. But trust me when I tell you it exists, because I'm not going to bring any type of examples except from what I have seen. I'll give you one example. And this happened recently, right? Within the past year. Give you one example. There were a number of brothers who expressed to me, African-American brothers, right? Informing me that perhaps I don't see some of the ways that they are treated by some people of the area. Perhaps I don't see it. So they want to bring it to my attention. So I heard what they had to say, and then I let them know, no, I seen it. I seen it. I'll give you an example. There was a brother one time who walked between me and another brother that was talking a number of times because I wasn't dressed like this. You understand? I had an izar on, a shirt, a kufi. So it wasn't like how we regularly dress. So the brother walked between us 2 times, 3 times, I believe, and didn't say anything. He know I was Muslim because who else is walking around with an izar and a kufi on? You understand? With a long shirt. Who else does that? The brother that I was standing with, he knew was Muslim because they was roommates, right? And if anybody get offended, listen, whatever. If the kufi dirty, change it. Point is that walk between us 2 times, 3 times, didn't say anything. Then the last time he happened to look at my face. Oh, salamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Kayf al-hal ya akhi? Oh, now it's kayf al-hal, but before I was just some black dude standing there. Huh? Where was all this before? You're walking by people that you know are Muslim. No salams before, but now all of a sudden you recognize this is me. Oh, brother, Imam. You understand? So how am I supposed to interpret that? What was that about? Do you understand what I'm saying? What was that about? And then when it's brought to their attention, no. The reality of it is that they don't understand. I see how they treat other people. I see how they treat other nationalities. Do you understand? I see how they treat the other African Americans. They don't treat them all the same. Why is that? Everybody really has to look into themselves and assess. Why is that? Why is it acceptable for you as a man to marry a white girl, a Spanish girl, an Asian girl, so on and so forth, but you won't marry an African American girl? Why is that? Why is it acceptable that you would allow your son to marry outside their race, and at times perhaps you allow your son to marry an African American girl or a black girl, but you will not allow your daughter to marry a black man? Why is that? These are things that I really want the Muslims to really give me a good answer for. And I'm stressing the Muslims because, yes, there are Muslims who are racist. Islam does not promote racism. Islam does not condone racism, but there are Muslims who are racist. And like one of the journalists, he said, alhamdulillah, I met Islam before I met the Muslims. Now you just think about that statement. But the point is that why is that? We have to learn to correct these things. Why is it that when the African Americans come to the masjid, you look at them as if they're not really African American? Or excuse me, as if they're not really Muslim. You're looking at them suspect. What is this person? So on and so forth, right? Person could say whatever it is they want to say, but you're not going to sit here and tell me that the problem of racism is not as bad as it is. It's very bad and it has to be corrected. You're not going to sit here and tell me an individual who has one parent who's African American, has another parent who's Guyanese, right? Okay. I've had Indian, Guyanese brothers debate me down, argue me down to the point that I literally have to get up and walk away from them because their stupidity, you can't break through it. I have to get up and walk away from them because they're telling me that I am not to say that I'm black. This is what they're telling me. Don't say you're black, say you're Guyanese. And I'm looking at them like, what are you talking about? Don't say you're black. I said, but I'm black. No, you're Guyanese. I said, I'm black. No, you're Guyanese. If you got one drop, this is what a brother told me. If you got one drop of Guyanese blood in you, you Guyanese. That's it. You ain't nothing else but Guyanese. I got up, I walked away because how ignorant is this person? What are you talking about? You think my forefathers that got off the boat in Guyana was always from Guyana? No, they got off the boat first. That's it. They got off the boat. They from the African diaspora, just like everybody else. Just because they got off the boat first, were they different? No, they the same thing. We all trace back to the same place. They African descendants. I'm an African descendant, so I'm black. What you talking about? Why is it? But see, the point is that here's the question: why is it so wrong for me to say I'm black? Why is that such a bad thing? Why should I run away from that and claim something else? You see how I look? The same type of cops that killed George Floyd and all the other people going, Ahmed Diallo, going all the way back. Emmett Till, the same type of people that killed Emmett Till. You think they're gonna look at me and say, oh, that brother Guyanese, he different? Huh? So listen, we have to, and of course that's with them, we have to, amongst ourselves as Muslims, we have to identify this problem and deal with the problem. And I brought those things up just to say that, listen, I understand the pain. I'm a black man in America, like other black men in America. You don't got to explain it to me. I understand that if I get pulled over for a traffic stop because I was speeding or whatever, that might be the end of my life. I understand that. I understand the rules are not the same for me. I understand that. But when it comes to the Muslims, it is important for the Muslims to understand that these are issues that have to be dealt with. So I don't want to come here and just gaslight. I don't want to come here and just throw fuel on the fire because we got a lot of that going on right now. A lot of brothers, they come on, they throw fuel on the fire and people love hearing it because they've been, they felt like they've been oppressed for so long. They just want to have a voice to say what they want to say. And now that's really popular. Forget all that. We need solutions. How do you fix this? We need solutions. Like the brother mentioned that white supremacy will not be eradicated except with Tawheed. We need solutions, practical solutions. So as relates to the Muslims, because we got to clean up our own house before we're going to clean up somebody else's house or go clean up outside. When it comes to the Muslims have to utilize Islam to get off of this racist stuff. Allah Ta'ala said, "Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa," that verily the believers are nothing but brothers. The believers are brothers. So where does racism fit into when you're dealing with your brother? Where is it room to be racist when you're dealing with your brother? Go back to Surah Al-Hujurat, study it, reflect on it, think about it, memorize it. Let that be your homework. Utilize it to get off of this stuff and to clean yourself from this racist behavior. It is incumbent as Muslims that we deal with this situation and not that we get uncomfortable. I gave a khutbah about racism. Brothers got uncomfortable. Oh, brother, you should have talked about it better. How am I going to talk about an ugly topic beautifully? How am I going to talk about an ugly topic beautifully? We talking about this racism. But no, they got mad because I was calling them out. I understand y'all call us abd, y'all call us slaves and stuff like that. You think an Arab may say to my face, I was an abd? I had an Arab one time in Egypt. I'm just be real. He got mad at me, cab driver, trying to get over on me. I said, man, I've been living here. I know the price. Go ahead with that. You are abd. Blaming a person for what? For it's not even blameworthy, right? I'm gonna say that it's not even blameworthy. Why? He said, "You are abd." I said, "Hey, nah, man, abd, Abdullah." You know what he said? He went like this. He was like, he just drove off. You understand? Because he realized his stupidity. Yes, I'm abd, I'm Abdullah. What are you talking about? You are abd too. We all from the ibad of Allah. So what that mean? I'm a abd. You trying to say I'm a person that's enslaved? I'm not enslaved. You think you can do that? Try that. Let's see how that work out for you. None of that stuff. So the point is that we have to get off of this stuff by one, acknowledging that yes, it exists amongst us. Yes, it exists among. If you ain't know, now you know it exists amongst us because I have experienced it myself. I ain't gonna need to go on nobody else's experience. I've experienced it myself. I've had a person that was Afghan. He told me, "You're not a real Muslim." I said, "What you talking about?" He said, "You ain't a real Muslim. You black boy. You ain't a real Muslim. You accepted Islam. You're not a real Muslim." I said, "Oh, that's that really? Oh, and what about Abu Bakr? What about Umar? What about Uthman? What about Ali? Did they accept Islam? Or were they born Muslim and raised Muslim? What he do? Just like that cab driver walk away looking stupid because he's stupid. And at the same time, let's talk about this too, reverse racism. I had a brother from forget it, I ain't gonna mention whatever, but African-American racists tell me with pride, he said, "Yeah, we don't all our mashaykh is African. We don't deal with no Arab. We don't take knowledge from no Arab." I said, "Really, brother?" I said, "Oh, what you say? We don't take knowledge from no Arab. We only take all our mashaykh is from Africa. One from Nigeria, one from Sudan, one from he naming all these places. He's feeling real happy. We don't take knowledge from no Arab." I said, "Brother," I said, "What, brother? Say that again. You don't take knowledge from what? We don't take knowledge from no Arab." I said, "And what was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What he do? Look stupid like the other two. Racism make you stupid. Racism is from Hizbiyah. Racist people are delusional. Racist people blame people for stuff that's not even blameworthy. When you hear and there's so much more from Jahiliyyah, so on and so forth, it's un-Islamic. Come on. When you hear this stuff, you realize that the Muslim who's trying to practice his deen, there's no room for being racist. And when you find that you got these racist tendencies, you got to deal with them. You have to eradicate them from your behavior. You have to become better. So if I wasn't going to say nothing else, that's really what I want to say and so much more, but I'm going to leave it like that.
Let me add something real quick before we...
Hold on. Let me bring the guest in. We got our brother.
Oh, we got a guest? Okay, I see him.
Unmute yourself and make sure your YouTube is turned down.
I don't know what that is. Alaikum salam.
Hold on, Sheikh. I'm trying to. The volume is low. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine with the hand.
Why is my volume so low? Hold.
Now your voice is good. You coming across good.
Just fine, Akhi.
I think he's talking about us.
Okay, here you go. I had it on phone instead of speaker. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Salam.
Yeah, on a couple of notes on the subject, right? Very interesting topic, and you guys touched on a lot of points. And so just my experience in a lot of these things, especially in light of, racism is such a touchy topic in this country right now. And everybody is so-called woke and everybody is sensitive to a lot of things. But you have a lot of Muslim organizations right now who are using the Black Lives Matter and all of these other different movements in order to push agendas. And I'm not to be cynical, but my experience with a lot of these organizations from their executive level of these national Muslim organizations, I don't find a lot of them to be authentic and actually working on this issue of racism or classism within the Muslim community. I remember prior to 9/11 how the interaction was, and all of you brothers are old enough to remember how we were prior to 9/11. 9/11 changed the dynamic in the Muslim community, because prior to that, most of our brothers and sisters they were drinking the American Kool-Aid, as you want to say, for lack of a better term, right? In terms of, go ahead, get your degree, we become doctors, engineers, and whatever's happening right now. The problem is y'all black people, y'all slaves, y'all don't understand this flow right here. See, y'all ain't get it. We understand it. And so we got this thing moving and grooving. And then after 9/11, right? And federal agencies started kicking down doors and confiscating and auditing people books, and people started getting beat up in the street and things of that nature. Then everybody started coming to the African-American masajid. I remember that. I was there. I used to be security for Imam Muhammad Rahimullah at that time. And I remember the heads of all of these national organizations was calling his office, asking for nasiha and asking for advice. And we used to joke. He used to be like, yeah, boy, they don't know this American white man like we know him, boy. They gonna learn now. And, we used to joke about it because posted after that, everybody became, they wanted to be kumbaya and let's get together and we a community and we got to combat this Islamic phobia, this word that eventually came out. But prior to that, it was basically, you stay over there, do your thing, we do our thing. And then, we'll meet up occasionally if we have to. With that being said, what I noticed is that majority of these brothers, man, they are continually to pump this bad dope that was given to them by their colonial masters. Even the way that their countries are set up right now, those basically were given to them by conquerors. That wasn't, the Islamic world ain't cut up the way it originally was cut up. This is cut up now, given to them by their French, Dutch, British, Portuguese masters, and so on and so forth. Spanish, Italian, German masters. The whole Muslim world is cut up based on that alone. So most of this initiative that they continue to push is like that. So like I told a brother the other day, I said, you want to see if Black Lives Matter to some of them? I said, try to marry one of his daughters. You'll see if Black Lives really matter to my man, right? You know what I'm saying? You'll see if Black Lives really matter to him. And that's a reality that we're dealing with. And like Sadiq said, that app, I experienced that on Hajj. Me and my ex-wife, back in 2000 or 2001, we were on Hajj. And the sister came to us because she kept dealing with some issues in her tent. And one sister sat down to us, and she was an Iraqi sister, but she lived in America. She said, yeah, the issue is that, they call y'all apps. I said, what are you talking about? She said, slave. I said, what? She said, well, I said, word, that's what they call it. She said, yeah, that's the issue right now. So, and that shocked me on Hajj, these experiences. And, I say that to say that, like when Sadiq said that, and I've heard that too, that, you're not a real Muslim, you accepted Islam. But like I tell people a lot of time, man, majority of Muslims, and we have experienced it, they are ignorant, man. They are just born into the religion from their country. It's like thinking an American knows Christianity because he's born in America. And they are literally ignorant to Islam, man. Most of them don't have a clue. They still praying the saints. They still got all type of nonsense going on, all type of innovative foolishness, things that's been passed on from tribal, from cultural, and now you have from their colonial masters. And so a lot of Muslims, when you meet them, you just be like, oh, bro, you don't know nothing about Islam. Yeah, you speak Arabic, but you are completely ignorant to Islam. And that's a lot of things that we are facing also. You're facing that. And so what happens a lot of time, man, that this issue of racism, it has to be eradicated on an individual basis. Like Muslims got to look at themselves in the mirror, man, and say whether or not it's the reverse racism. And sometimes what happens with us, man, being victim of it so much, like when you come into Islam, that's the last place you want to experience racism. Like for those of us who are revert, taking a shahada, you have brothers. And so he be so hyped and geek, and he may have read what Malcolm X said about his experience in Hajj and so on and so forth. You got to realize Malcolm was, he was getting treated different. So when a brother comes into a situation, he's looking for that brotherly feeling. So when he's faced with that racist into contact, it activates a gene in him that that reverse racism, he may not mean it, but at times it's like that's his go-to mechanism to fight it. Like, what? And he, you know, in his mind, he's looking at a Muslim, whether or not he's Pakistani, whether or not he's from Palestine, wherever it is, whatever group hit him with some type of racial interaction, he just reverts back to this mindset that has protected him and helped him deal with it for so many years in his life. And I think just the Muslims in this country that we interact with, man, first of all, we can't let it slide. You got to call it on the spot, and you got to check it, and you got to correct him or her where they at, man, and make them man and woman up and face that bad adab, man, that ignorance that's within them, that tribal ignorance, that colonial master ignorance that presides in them, that they continue to push, right? And that's just an issue. And then when you're dealing with these national organizations that you have, the big groups, I don't want to say no names, but we all know who they are, man. Like a lot of them, bro, they have political agendas, right? And it ain't really about, because you see that they push Black Lives Matter, but then they also push LGBTQ and all that. So it ain't really about racism and solve, because right now they trying to figure out how to get themselves out the cookie jar, right? All of their money, all of their degrees, none of that stopped them from going through the fitna after 9/11. So they trying to make sure that they don't get pushed back into that. So to them, it really ain't about solving a racist issue within the Muslim community. It's about pushing their political agendas and being in tune for the American dream and putting themselves in the best position to continue to make money, build their institutions without as much riffraff that they experienced post 9/11. And we used to laugh. I'm like, yo, bro, what you going through ain't nothing. You understand what I'm saying? You didn't get them dogs sicked on you. You didn't get them fire hose put on you. You really ain't been lynched. You know, your man may have got beaten up coming out the store. Somebody may have threw some eggs on you, but you really ain't experienced the full wrath of this American white man like we have. You understand what I'm saying? So it really didn't ruffle our feathers the way that it ruffled yours. But I just don't think that a lot of Muslims are authentic in addressing that issue. And in closing, brother told me he had approached a Somali sister for marriage. And all the Somali brothers was just trying to knock her down, for lack of a better term. So he presented a situation, whole thing, his whole situation was right. And one of her brothers was her wakil. And he said, man, you ain't marrying no American black dude. You crazy? He said, that ain't happening. We ain't going for that. And she told the brother, she said, I can't do nothing. She said, it was so crazy is that they know all the Somali dudes ain't trying to do nothing but be intimate with me. And here it is, you presenting everything right. You trying to get my wakil number. You know, whatever my dowry is, you coming correct. And they just shut the door down, all because he was an American black dude. He hit me with that. I said, bro, I could have told you that before you even went down that rabbit hole. I could have told you what that was going to be. But he was shocked. He thought like, yo, I'm together. I got my thing together. I make good money, good job, good credit, got my own place. I'm coming through the door the right way. I'm not trying to backdoor it. And he just said, yo, when she came with him like that, and he was like, yo, she said, oh yeah, that's just a regular thing, blah, blah, blah. I knew it was gonna be an issue. And so it's just not, it's not an authentic situation. And most of the imams, most of these large groups, these organizations, they don't feel that this is an issue, honestly, man. This right here is just, is they modus operandi. You follow what I'm saying? They don't look at it as an issue. They just look at it like, yo, this is what it is. This is how we rock. We the real Muslims, y'all abs, and this is what it is. You understand what I'm saying? We have pump fake with you around you, but behind closed doors, this is how we carry it. And until they face that ugly demon, and like I told brother, man, when you study the companions, when you study those first couple of generations, and then you compare them to us, you actually see why they conquered and why we are the conquered. Again, man, may Allah continue to reward you, brothers, for these heavy conversations, and may they continue to be used as an impetus for us to rectify our affairs and the inspire us to change and to be active and diligent in not just like Sadiq said in gaslighting, but in actually addressing these issues of racism, of ignorance, of poverty, of failed marriages, of discord within the brotherhood, dysfunctional families, and all these other issues that we act like they don't exist, and that we sugarcoat and don't address a lot of times. And may this be one platform that allows us to look at the ugliness that we face and come up with solutions and amongst those people who say they are part of those who follow the Sunnah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, I want to just say, just piggybacking off what the brother said, and I'll let the brothers get their last words in, because I believe we've been over 2 hours now. I just want to say that when dealing with this issue of racism, because we see a lot of people that deflect, because again, I'm emphasizing the fact that from the distinguishing characteristics of the believer is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy anil munkar. From the distinguishing characteristics of the believer is to enjoin good and forbid evil. And racism amongst the ranks of the believers is an evil. It is a form of tahazzub. It is a form of partisanship. And so if a Muslim comes to address this munkar that is found within many Muslims today, then a person shouldn't use deflection tactics. And one of the deflection tactics that we find being used, not just on a person that has reverse racism, but on a person who doesn't have that, but is just legitimately trying to correct wrongs, is that the person is nationalistic. You start hearing that term being thrown around. He's being nationalistic, like Black nationalistic. And again, a lot of times, to me, this reminds me of the person who can look at a person may be 20, 21, 22, whatever the case may be, and he sleeps with a 17-year-old. And next thing you know, they're saying, oh, look, he's a pedophile. And so now they have this word that they're using, pedophile, but it's gone outside the meaning of what a pedophile actually is. A pedophile literally is somebody, it's a clinical term, where it's dealing with a person who cannot find sexual arousal except for a child that's prebescuous, if I'm pronouncing that right, has not yet reached the age of puberty. They found arousal in children. That's a pedophile. A 17-year-old and there's no difference between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old as far as shape looking like this. That's a grown woman. So if you have a 30-year-old sleep with a 17-year-old and was aroused by a 17-year-old, he doesn't fit the definition of pedophile. So likewise, if you have a Muslim addressing the fact that this is a reality that exists, that there are racist Muslims or Muslims with racist tendencies, then this isn't being a nationalist. And so a nationalist, so we can understand words, a nationalist is he who, nationalism is identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially in the conclusion, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. All right, so that's understood. And the second definition, advocacy of or support for the political independence of a particular nation or people. So enjoining good and forbidding evil wouldn't fall into nationalism. It'd be as it relates to racism. It's just that, enjoining good and forbidding evil. So we have to stop falling into deflection tactics when it comes to addressing this point of racism. There was a recent uproar for this very same reason due to a video by a YouTuber that claims to be Salafi. Well, excuse me, I don't think he even claims to be Salafi, but I could be mistaken. A white brother by the name of Sajid Lipham, when he did a video about I'm not sure where the two women were from. I believe they may have been Somali origin, where the daughter was saying to her mother, "Are you Muslim first or Black first?" So to make a long story short, the brother made statements. She was indoctrinated with this, and she was this, and she was that. She was indoctrinated with that. Where did she get that thinking from? Who indoctrinated her with that? From my recollection of what I saw of it, he never took the time to reflect that this woman came to this conclusion because of what she was experiencing from other Muslims. And she alluded to that when she made a statement, these other Muslims don't care about you, or something to this effect, because of her, she was saying this about her mother. These other Muslims don't care about you. You as a Somali, or in reality, a Black Muslim, they don't care about you. And so most likely some of the same things that the brothers, you brothers have mentioned that you've experienced, most likely with her growing up in America, she experienced that too. And I find it to be a problem when people attack a reaction but don't go after the cause to that reaction. That's not helping the solution. That's not helping the situation at all. That's not bringing a solution to the issue.
Yeah, say that again. Say that again. So the people need to marinate on that. The problem is, yeah. People having a problem to the reaction, but not the cause.
Exactly. People have a problem, and that's not. And we know from our Islamic training, from Colorblind Blindness overseas, we know that we don't deal with matters like that. You deal with the problem, the cause of the problem. I want to give an example. It may not. I want to give an example. I'm going to give this example. When I was in Damaj, and the only reason why I hesitated because of the personalities that are being mentioned, personalities of controversy. But when I was in Damaj, there was a fight that broke out between two students in the camp. And one of the students knocked out the tooth of another, right? And so they both went back to Hajuri for judgment. And Hajuri kicked out the student who got his tooth knocked out. But he kicked him out after it was determined that he was the one that caused the fight. And I don't recall, it's been years now, I don't recall what exactly he said or did that caused the fight, but it was determined that he was the one that caused it. He was the inception of the fight was as a direct result of that individual. And during the fight, he lost his tooth, right? So among the judgments that was made is that guy had to go because he was looked at as a problem, And so this is what I mean when I say we are supposed to be dealing with the cause, not dealing with the reaction to the cause. Because if we deal with the reaction every time, that's why some people have a problem with Sajid Lipham in that video, and I understand why, because he dealt with the reaction, but kind of overlooked the cause. And that's not going to result in anything and changing any of these things. So anyway, I'll let the brothers get their last comments. I'll start with Ismail and then we'll move to Sadiq and then we'll close out, inshallah.
Okay, so I just want to mention to the brothers that this whole issue of racism and prejudice in reality It's from the fears of Jahiliyyah, as we mentioned. It's from the imitation of Shaitan, of Iblis, and it has no place in our personality as Muslims. And like any other problem, drug addiction, alcohol, whatever a person's problem may be, or sickness of the heart, whatever sickness of the heart may be, one of the first means towards rectifying that problem is acknowledging that there is a problem. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he said that the cure for the desires, the way you cure the sickness in a person's hawa is by opposing the hawa. That's how you cure it. Okay, so you have to acknowledge and realize and recognize that racism is a problem, and that there are people who look at people, that were darker skin and they call them ugly. Just by since your skin is dark, you're automatically ugly. And there are some people, I'm sure, who look at people with fair skin. Like, for example, people who may look at some Caucasian people and consider them ugly. I've heard nationalistic, prejudiced Black people make statements about fair-skinned people, implying and indicating that they are less attractive than them. All of this kind of stuff has to stop, all right? Because it has no place in Islam. And as the Prophet ﷺ said to the man who was lowering his izar in an attempt to hide the disfiguration in his legs, because he had some problem with his legs, he said, Kullu khalqillahi hasan. All of Allah's creation is beautiful. All of Allah's creation is beautiful. So we have to understand that. But what I want to mention briefly is what the ulama have mentioned, or what they explained the word al-Jahiliyyah to me. So when we look at the sharh of Masail al-Jahiliyyah by Sheikh Dr. Salih ibn Fawzan Hafidhullah, he said, أما الجاهلية فالمراد بها النسبة إلى الجهل والجهل عدم العلم والجاهلية هي التي ليس فيها رسول وليس فيها كتاب والمراد بها ما كان قبل بعثة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال تعالى ولا تبرجنا تبرج الجاهلية الأولى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the Sheikh, he said, before we get to the ayah, that Jahiliyyah, what's meant by Jahiliyyah is that which is connected to ignorance. And that ignorance is lack of knowledge. It's the non-existence of knowledge. He said, in Jahiliyyah is that time or time period that doesn't have a messenger in it, and there's no book in this clear, pure form that's available for the people. There's no prophet or no messenger there at the time, and there's no book, no messenger, and there's no book there that the people can refer back to in its pure form. All right, and this is specifically talking to, in this, like, for example, when we look at the book, The Affairs of Ignorance, Masail al-Jahiliyyah, written by Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah. And anytime you hear the ulama talk about the affairs of al-Jahiliyyah, they're talking about that time period that existed before Allah sent the Prophet ﷺ with the revelation, before he commissioned him with the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to that period in such a way in the statement of Surah Al-Ahzab, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do not display yourselves, carry yourselves, referring to the women, how they used to walk in a way that's enticing to men. Do not display yourselves in that enticing manner that you're used to in the period of Jahiliyyah, back in the day before Islam came. Don't carry yourself like you used to carry yourself, right, in a provocative way before the Prophet ﷺ was sent with the Quran, with the Sunnah. So all of that behavior that takes place, anytime we imitate those things that are blameworthy from the period that existed, the period of time that existed before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet ﷺ with the revelation, this is all blameworthy. None of this is acceptable. We are Muslims and we have responsibility to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find that our Salaf, they did not tolerate this kind of behavior. They didn't tolerate nationalism. They didn't tolerate tribal pride. They didn't tolerate people thinking that they were superior to the next person because of their lineage or because of their complexion or because of, where they were from. And an example of this as we close is a narration that we can find in Al-Adab al-Mufrad. Well, Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrated نعم, he narrated, he said, حدثنا عثمان المؤذن قال حدثنا عوف عن الحسن عن عتي ابن ضمرة قال رأيت عند أبي رجلا تعزى بعزاء الجاهلية فعضه أبي ولم يكنه. He said that, and this Imam Bukhari brings the isnad, where Damra, he said, I saw Ubay, meaning Ubay ibn Ka'b. He said, I saw Ubay radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and there was a man with Ubay, and the man was going on with this, carrying on like how the people used to carry on in Jahiliyyah, with his with his racism and his nationalism, and I'm better than this, and we better than those people, and all of this kind of stuff. He was carrying on in that manner. He said, so Ubay told him, well, if in so many words, if you're all that, and your tribe, you think your lineage is this, you think you're superior, then go bite your father's penis off. Now, people scared. One time, when I was the imam, I said, look, I'm going to give a hadith. I want to give a khutbah and I mentioned hadith. They begged me not to give the hadith, so no, people are not ready for that. This is authentic narration collected in Adab al-Mufrad. Sheikh Al-Bani said all the people in this in the chain Sahih, Sheikh Muhammad Sa'id al-Aslan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, also agreed that this narration is authentic. Ubay ibn Ka'b, the companion of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, told a man, oh, you think you this, you think you that, you racist, you prejudiced, you see yourself to be superior, go bite your father's penis off then. Now, people might think, oh, that's extreme. But Ubay said he heard the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say, if you hear someone walking around carrying on like how some of you brothers be carrying on, oh, how could you disgrace my family? People think that when somebody marries outside of their tribe or they marry outside their nationality, specifically if you marry somebody dark skinned or somebody black, that you're disgracing, you're bringing shame on the whole family. And even the Muslims who are normally typically against that kind of behavior will now acquiesce and go with the flow of racism and nonsense. For you people who behave like that, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has instructed us that when we see people acting like that, he said, tell them to bite off their father's penis. And the narrator said that when Ubay did it, he did it just like that. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to make it sound like it wasn't as bad. He wasn't shy. He said it just like that. He said, and the reason why he did the Ubay said, because I heard the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tell us that when you find somebody running around with this racist, prejudice, delusional, superiority complex, you tell that person to go bite off his father's penis and don't sugarcoat it when you tell him. As the ulama say here, this means that the Prophet ﷺ was letting the companions know, when you narrate that hadith, do not sugarcoat it. And the ulama, when they explained the reason why the Prophet ﷺ used such a aggressive, what would be considered linguistically by some to be vulgar approach, he said, because for a person to use their lineage or their national origin or race to try to imply that they're superior to somebody else, the way you repel that is by letting the person know, okay, so you think you this and that because you came out of this man's loins, then go back and bite the loins that you came out of then. Since you love your father's loins so much and you love your nationality so much, then go bite the area where those loins come through, since it means that much to you. You talking about Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the person who had the best etiquette, who Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala testified that he was ala khuluqin azim, upon the most tremendous character, the person who was considerate, the person who was more shy than any human being you could ever imagine. But when it came to this issue of racism and prejudice, that's how he dealt with people who had that kind of mentality. So for the brothers, who want to continue that, you want to keep on with this foolishness, right? With all of these, this separation, this invisible wall of separation that we have, where, it's just an unspoken rule that the children are not going to marry outside of their tribe. And if they do, then the people better be of this complexion. They better at least physically fit the mold and not look like what we consider to be ugly. For example, somebody that's dark or whatever the case is, they better not fall into that category. For you brothers and you sisters that still have that, I personally, me, myself, I can probably, out of every single case that I've seen that came across my desk in my life, I believe that there was only one case where father actually came to me and said, listen, I'm trying to find someone for my daughter. I do not, his nationality is not really important to me. As long as he's a person of the Sunnah, my daughter wants somebody of the Sunnah, we want somebody of the Sunnah for our daughter. That's the only thing that matters, that he fears Allah, that he's a person from Ahl Sunnah. I myself have not seen every single case. I've actually gotten requests from quote unquote Salafi brothers, call my phone and say to me, listen, I'm trying to find someone for my sister, but we looking for somebody. If you know anybody from my nationality, let me know. You understand what I'm trying to say? This is normal. This is not something that this ain't hidden. This is not, I don't want to mention too much because it feels like if I tell y'all maybe 5% of the actual stories and things that I've witnessed and encountered, heard people say, a lot of the Muslims are not mature enough to handle that. And if we say it, then what's going to happen is the people who are at the oppressed end, or the end of the offended end, the end of the people who will get offended by a statement like this, specifically Black, because all of it was against Black people. I never heard, I'm just telling the truth. I never heard anybody, I've never seen a case where somebody flipped out, lost their mind, and it turned into this big war because they married somebody from, Korea, or because they married somebody from, Pakistan, somebody married from Yemen, or married somebody from Egypt, married from Philistine, Syria. I've never seen nobody flip out. I've seen people, their family wasn't okay with it, and then they eventually came around. The only time where I seen wars almost break out, it was always involving the Black man. Never, no issue. I've never in my life, I'm talking about ever, you understand, seen no issue where things got that bad and somebody marrying the Black man wasn't involved. And you run around, you Pakistani brothers that we love, Arab brothers that we love, whatever, Bengali brothers that we love, I want y'all to prove to me, Indian Guyanese brothers, Indian Trinidadian brothers, and then, mashallah, in the Caribbean, their little things have gotten a lot better. Okay, so we don't want to go too hard on y'all. But y'all know, the people who doing this, if you're not in denial, you already know. Nobody wants to talk about it. You know what I'm trying to say? We were mentioning the member. I know it'll make people uncomfortable. And, they would just hope that I don't bring this up. Most people, in my opinion, they fall into one of few categories. They will never, ever, they ain't with no integrated marriages. Okay, and even the integrated social relationships have a limit, right? But they may not necessarily, they either hate it with a passion, ready to go to war over it. They hate it with a passion, don't really want to go to war over it, but hope it doesn't happen. Like they might not hate it with a passion, they just really don't want it. And they hope that they never get put in a situation where somebody in their family that wants to marry somebody outside of their nationality, starting with outside of their tribe, outside of their country, outside of that whole continent. Then it goes a little more to the person's fair skin, and the last person on the list, not even an option, is somebody Black. They fall into that category. And the last category is, they're doing everything they could to try to make sure it doesn't happen, right? They just, even if you bring it to the brothers, the average brother's not going to come back at you and say no. A lot of time the brothers, they'll try to put it on their family. It's not me. That's like the brother who called me. And it's not the only one brother. Multiple brothers have told me this. It's not me, Akhi. Really, if it was up to me, I would, I would marry anybody for their deen. But my parents, they want somebody from my country. You know how stupid that sounds? You understand that? Now, maybe that's me because we're American and we understand, we accept Islam. There's a difference between birrul walidain and, having this silat al-rahm, keeping our families together and not causing tafarruq and tanazu' amongst our families and doing anything we could do to stay away from a tahrish and separation and fitna, right? We understand that from an Islamic perspective, but we don't get to the point where it's like worship, where we now allow our families to come dictate to us to do something haram, and we try to write it off as it's birrul walidain. Well, we got to obey our parents and we got to respect our uncles. Our uncles are the superior ones in our family. Your uncles are juhala. They're ignoramuses. They don't know anything about the Quran. They don't know anything about the Sunnah. And what they're ordering you with, and the mentality that they're trying to cultivate you upon, that you are cowardly acquiescing to, is in all actuality in disobedience to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La ta'ata lil-makhluqi fi ma'siyati al-khaliq," or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In authentic narration, there is no obedience to the creation if it entails and involves disobedience to the Creator. And we see how Ubay ibn Ka'b was instructed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to handle people who have racist ideas. You don't accept their ideas. You don't have to acquiesce or go along with their foolishness. And that does not make you disobedient. That does not mean you ruin your family. That means that you have a level of spine, a level of courage and manhood or womanhood to such an extent that you're willing to stand up in the face of adversity. So that's all I wanted to present regarding that topic. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts. هذا ما عندي وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. هذا وصلوات الله وسلامه على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. فضل يا أخانا صديق.
جزاك الله خير. جزاك الله خير. حياك الله. Now, in closing, I just want to reiterate that racism is stupidity, and it makes an individual stupid. One of the mashayikh he mentioned, he said, when an individual is being racist, knowing that our father Adam came from Turab, was made from Turab, he said that is like a person saying, my clay was better than your clay, right? It makes absolutely no sense in any which way, shape, or form. It's stupidity on every level, right? But again, I want to also remind that racism is imitation of shaitan. Racism is also a construct that came from the kuffar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his noble book, he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. O humanity, we made you from a man and from a woman. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلٍ. And we made you into tribes and nations, or nations and tribes. لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you may get to know each other. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He breaks down the human beings as being tribes and nations. The whole issue in the construct of race, as is understood in modern terms, then this stems from the kuffar. This is a construct that the kuffar came up with so that they can justify the slave trade and the treatment of those groups that they felt were inferior to them, right? These Europeans. So let this also be understood, that this whole thing that these people are on, and that they think that they are so justified in being upon that, its origins is not good, because again, it leads an individual to being delusional, to thinking that they're better than what they actually are. Allah Ta'ala, and also it leads an individual into understanding that the metric by way in which individuals are better or worse are based upon these things that they have come up with, based upon their constructs, where Allah Ta'ala makes it very clear to us, and He tells us in the very clear terms, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that those from you who are the most noble, who are the best, who are the most noble, they're who? With Allah, there are those who have the most taqwa, those who have the most fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the best. And then Allah Ta'ala, He ends the verse by saying, Inna Allaha alimun khabirun, that Allah, verily Allah, He is the all-knower, the all-informed. Allah is the all-knower, the all-informed. This is the reality of the situation. So the Muslims, we have to cleanse ourselves from these traits, and we have to be honest and have honest conversations. We can't put our heads in the ground, in the sand, and act as if it doesn't exist. And we can't be of these individuals who become super defensive and want to dismiss everything by saying, "Oh, but the Muslims are racist, so then that's it." You know, you talking about it is not the route to go. So talking about it is not the route to go, but then ignoring it is the route to go. Ignoring it while people are still being racist and acting in ways that are not befitting, and people are discriminating against other Muslims and so on and so forth. So we shouldn't speak about that discrimination, be quiet about it, and then that's going to do what? Let it happen in silence, and now you're comfortable with that? Or do we want to eradicate it? We have to speak about it, right? And as we know, as we heard in the beginning of this dialogue, the Prophet ﷺ said that this is one of the things that's going to remain. So we know this is going to remain. This is going to be here. However, we could minimize its presence and we can minimize its effects within our communities. And the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said that these things are going to remain, this doesn't mean that the Prophet ﷺ was pleased with these things. No, he was just stating a matter of fact. He was just stating a matter of fact that these things are going to remain. Ala kulli hal, we can minimize them and minimize their effects amongst our communities. Because, and I want you to reflect on this, and I want you to reflect on how idiotic racism is. And I want you to reflect on how stupid the racist is. And I keep saying that, and whoever gets offended, then be offended, because the racist is stupid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the believers. Allah Ta'ala, he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, la yaskhar qawmun min qawmin asa an yakunu khayran minhum, wala nisa min nisa asa an yakunna khayran minhun, wala talmizu anfusakum, wala tanabazu bil alqab, bi'sa lismul fusuqi ba'da al-iman, bi'sa lismul fusuqu ba'da al-iman. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Allah Ta'ala, he says what means, O you who believe, let not a group of you scoff at another group. And I want you to listen to the translation of this verse with racism in mind and the actions of the racists. And we're talking to the Muslims. I mean, the kuffar is, there's no sin after kufr, meaning that they kuffar. I mean, so whatever. We're talking to the Muslims. Allah Ta'ala says, oh, you who believe. Now I want you to look, how does racism jive with this ayah? Right? Allah Ta'ala says, oh, you who believe. What translated means, oh, you who believe. Let not a group scoff at another group. Let not a group scoff and look down at another group. It may be that the latter is better than the former. It may be that the group is being made fun of is better than those who are making fun of them. So how do we know who's better? Who's better? The one who has the most taqwa. Who's better? The one that comes from your village, the one that comes from your land, the one that comes from your tribe, the one that has the color like you. That makes you better? No, the one that has the most taqwa. So who are you? And this goes back to what? The race is being delusional, being stupid and delusional, thinking that they're better than what they are. And that works both ways. That works both ways. And I want to say this because I had it on my mind and I want to say it, is that on the flip side, African-American Black people, right? You cannot go to the extreme of overpraising yourself because others put you down so much. And I understand that's a reaction. You understand? A coping mechanism to deal with that type of scorn and scoff and so on and so forth. But we have to keep things in their true place. So this concept of now all of a sudden every Black man is a king and every Black woman is a queen and so on and so forth. This is delusional. This is not correct. So an individual who has very low moral standards, individual who has I don't know how many children out of wedlock, individual who is the most trifling and of individuals, right? All of a sudden now that's a king and this is a queen. The most lowest from the low life is a queen and a king because they Black. You gotta stop with this stuff, because what happens is, do you know what yani the end of that road is? The end of that road was the Black man saying the Black man was God and the white man was the devil. You understand? The Black man's God, the white man's the devil. That's the end of that. You go from kings and queens and now what gods and whatever. Come on, you got to stop with that stuff. Stop being delusional. You understand? You're just as stupid as the white man that's racist. In any event, Allah Ta'ala goes on to say what translated means. Nor let any woman scoff at other women. Nor let any woman scoff at another group of women. It may be that the latter is better than the former. Nor defame one another. Nor insult one another by nicknames. Don't call each other disrespectful names. Don't refer to each other in disrespectful terms. So anybody that's still running around calling black people abd, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You a believer. You gonna put your Muslim brother down, calling him a name like that? Any black person that's still running around calling white people honkies and crackers and all that type of stuff, fear Allah. You're gonna refer to your Muslim brother like this? Allah Ta'ala, he says what translated means, how bad is it to insult one's brother after having faith? How bad is it to insult a Muslim after having faith by calling them bad names, calling them evil names, and so on and so forth? We have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to stop this stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he ends the verse. For those who feel that maybe, I don't know, I'm not truly convinced, maybe I could still be like this and it's not that bad, and so on and so forth. Allah ends this verse by saying, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And whoever does not repent, then these are the ones who indeed they are the criminals. These are the zalimun. These are the misappropriators. These are those who put things in an improper place, because zulm is to put something in other than its rightful place. That's what oppression is. That's what zulm is. That's to put something in other than its rightful place. Allah Ta'ala says, and whoever does not repent, from the aforementioned, whoever does not repent from the aforementioned and from other the sins, whoever does not repent, then these are the ones who are indeed criminals. These are the ones who are indeed oppressors. And this construction in the Arabic language is one of emphasis. Then these are the ones who are indeed the criminals, who are the oppressors, who are the misappropriators. These are the wrongdoers. So repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Cleanse yourself from this disease of racism. Eradicate this racism within yourself and within your family and within your friends and associates, so on and so forth. Get rid of this stuff, because it's not befitting for a Muslim. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وجزاكم الله خيرا.
Barakallahu fiqh, ya ikhwan. As you all know, man, I've been up since 2:50 this morning, and I can feel that starting to catch up with me, right? I just wanted to say in closing, given the last remarks, because again, these heavyweight dialogues are meant to be solution-oriented. And so when addressing and looking at this particular discussion, I think that for people that are in specified areas, especially if you're attending masajid that are multicultural, we have different people of varying different ethnicities, then it's best to handle these types of affairs in a localized manner and in whatever way is most effective in addressing it. Because one, I do believe that you have some people stuck in denial with a colorblind attitude from the types of racism that we saw, that are just deny to the very end. And that particular attitude is not going to change anything. But when you have, every situation is different, but if you have situations where some type of racist statement or action has become manifest, then it's probably best to have the person who is considered of authority religiously of the community get involved in addressing that. And even if there is a reluctance of that person getting involved, then it probably needs to be, there probably needs to be some type of pressure put on him to get him involved, because those are the type of things that a person of that nature should be dealing with. That's as it relates to a community that is multicultural. because we have to start dealing with these things head on. And a lot of times it's just some people make statements because they generally are misinformed. But then you have other situations, like if you go to communities which predominantly 80% a particular ethnicity. Like I'll give you an example of the Somali community, because I believe when dealing with a lot of the Somalis, there's a lot of cultural racism that's present. And I'll give you an example. There was a particular community that I was told about, and I got this information from a brother who was living within that community, that there was a Janazah fund between 3 different Somali communities in that area. They were raising money. The money was supposed to be, at least that's what they were putting out to the people, but the money was supposed to be to bury Muslims within these communities who couldn't afford to bury themselves. And so the masjid that was predominantly Somali, but had other people there too, Black Americans, some Arab and others. This particular masjid, when they would go on the minbars or hit the community up for money, that's how they would present the project. So then an African-American brother who attended the masjid, a revert brother, he died, he passed away. And so some of the brothers went to the administration of this masjid, Somali, to the administrators, excuse me, not the whole administration, but 2 of the administrators, and they were Somalis. And they said to these 2 administrators, brother so-and-so who attended the masjid, he just passed away, his parents were kuffar, blah, 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 we need help burying him. I'm a person that's given to the Janazah fund. People have to understand under the Janazah fund, it's for anybody within the community. He was told by these 2 administrators, oh, that fund, Janazah fund, is for the Somalis. You African Americans need to start your own fund. And the brother who informed me of this said the administrator said it plain, explicit, just like that. Although when they hit the general people up in the community for money, they weren't making that explicitly clear. The money that's being donated is the Janazah fund for the Somalis of this community and these 2 other communities that we're connected with for this purpose. So when you're dealing with communities like that, Allah knows best. I think it's going to be harder to probably deal with because of some of the deep-rooted and deep-seated cultural racism. Because from me talking to other Somali brothers that I am good friends with, that they don't have that attitude with just us. They have that attitude with themselves. I know a good friend, a good brother of mine, that Somali brother still hasn't gotten married to this very day. And a lot of the times because he wants to get a Salafi sister. And when he goes to people of his country, his own countrymen, to get that good Salafi sister, she may not be from the tribe that will accept him amongst them. And so he's still unmarried to this day. And so that's how deep-rooted and deep-seated the cultural racism with them is. So for me, dealing with that, that's on a whole nother level. But when you're in communities that are more multicultural, where it's an even playing field with everybody that's there, it's easier to address these types of situations, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. And every individual is different, so you can't step with a black and white attitude. As for the example, the last example I gave, I would just say find another masjid. because there's no way that I will put up with that type of stuff. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. But it's hoped that videos of this nature will be a means to at least make a crack or a dent in the barrier as it relates to this discussion being able to be discussed and these problems being dealt with by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's permission. As usual, I encourage the brothers and sisters to subscribe to the channel for obvious reasons, like the video for obvious reasons. The video, it looks like we have well over 20 people viewing as of right now. So it should be well over 20 likes. So I'll encourage the brothers and sisters to do that, to stay informed on the latest content that the channel will be kicking out. And inshallah, we have some things in the works or some ideas on the drawing board. And we hope that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala blesses us with success in bringing these ideas to fruition by His permission. And with that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I hope that everybody has benefited from this particular discussion. And I hope that everybody has a good night. Waffaqana Allahu wa iyyakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.